Thank you for joining us for the latest Berks and Bucks FA support session. This evening we're going to be looking at player recruitment and registrations. It is always a timely matter, always a timely issue to discuss, an area which grassroots clubs certainly need support and are feeling the pinch in. So the session this evening, we're going to try and cover a couple of aspects around this. The presentation is basically going to be split into three main sections. First is looking at potential recruitment avenues, ways you can attract and recruit new players to help bolster the squads. We're then going to look around some of the regulations, particularly around notices of approach and transfers, some of those real key issues which can trip people up every now and then and are things to bear in mind as you go about signing new players onto the club. Finally, I'm going to do a quick whole game demonstration just to try and do a recap for those who are less familiar with it or maybe going into using whole game for player registrations for the first time. What I will say is that the first section is probably primarily directed towards adult clubs, as this is where the greatest challenges lie. I would say, however, that many of the same principles will still apply to youth clubs. So hopefully, if you are watching this as a club secretary or player registration officer for a youth club, hopefully it will still be relevant and useful. Particularly the information to come around regulations do apply in the youth section just as much as they do in adult, so will be important to pay attention to there. So moving on to player recruitment, I've kind of broken this down into three main sections, looking at internal, online, and then external routes you can look at. What I can't promise you though is a magic bullet. What I can't do is create an additional 20 new players out of thin air, or tell you where to go and pick those 20 players up off the streets to give you extra players per squad. But what this will hopefully do is offer some new ideas or potential routes you may not have thought of or you may not be aware of. And I will try and look at some of those areas where we at Berks and Bucks can also provide support. First thing I would say around player recruitment is to look within the club. I mean, players are your biggest supporters and hopefully also the chance to be your best recruiters. If you think about it, if you're, let's say you are a one-team adult club and you've got 20 players in the squad, that's 20 sets of people with 20 sets of friends, sets of family, colleagues who can be and should be on the lookout for new members of the team. So that's 20 networks that you can look to exploit and tap into to try and recruit new players. Appreciate that's not always easy to do. Some players may not see it as their role, may struggle, want to just show up and play on a weekly basis. So there's a couple of different ways you might try and lean on players to then help you with recruiting more members to the squad. First is you could try and challenge players to it. This can be throughout the season or particularly maybe during the close season, during the summer. Challenge every player to bring one mate for a pre-season training session over the course of that summer. Invite them along to have a kick around, get to know the team, but potentially try out. You can also try and incentivize it. Look at incentivizing players around recruiting new teammates. Not necessarily saying you can or should be throwing bucket loads of cash at them, but if a player is successful in bringing in a new player, maybe they can get a discount on their membership fees or subs for the course of that season. If you look at it, actually, if you, suddenly you've gone from having one player subs, a membership fees, to having two players, if you give that first player a little cut on that, you're still going to be pulling in more money than you would have been otherwise. And then if your challenge is actually more around getting enough players week in, week out to come to the games, so you've got your squad of 20 or 30 players, but actually it's a challenge to get 11 showing up on a Saturday or a Sunday morning to play the game. So you can always try and throw some of that responsibility back over to the players themselves. Make it that player's responsibility to find their replacement if they're not going to be there that week. If your star striker's out, actually tell him he's got to find another member of the squad who can guarantee that they're going to be there and will definitely be at the game, hopefully banging in the goals for them as well. Looking ahead now at some online resources. Obvious ones are there, of course, social media. You've got your normal routes, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and indeed a lot of clubs within the county do have picture sites. The one issue around that possibly, though, is that you do kind of rely on people already knowing who you are as a club and either following you on social media or seeking you out on Pitcheroo, so relying on coming up at the top of some of those Google searches. So although social media certainly has a platform, certainly has a role, and it's a massive tool, it doesn't always, you may struggle sometimes to really reach new audience and people that aren't already aware that the club exists. Other options you can then go to would be local notice boards. Most towns, villages and districts do have community Facebook groups with potentially thousands of members. So I live in Abingdon where Berks and Berks FA are based. I'm a member of the local Abingdon Facebook group, and there are constantly posts going up from new residents, people who've just moved to the town looking to get involved in volunteering or playing sports. They want to know what the best shop is for this or try and find a handyman. So actually, if you look at that and you see that some of these groups will have, as I said, thousands of people involved in on them, it's a great tool to use for posting opportunities. Particularly, again, perhaps around the close season, over the course of the summer, post on there that you've got an open training session or an open session where anyone can come along. If they fancy a kick around, fancy a game of football that night, and it might lead to some new connections and new players that you didn't know were already out there. Finally, you can also advertise on the Berks and Berks FA website on what we call our player notice boards. Should be a screenshot of this coming up on the screen right now. So the link is berks-berksfa.com/notice boards. That'll take you to a main landing page where you will be directed if you're looking for player notice board or volunteer notice board. If you do want to post something on there, the email contact would be Steph Clark, who is our communications officer, and that can be marketing@berks-berksfa.com. Just to put some of this in context, we've had 55 adverts this season from players and clubs in the local area. So either players looking to join a team close to them or teams themselves advertising saying we're looking for a striker or looking for a goalkeeper, defender, be what it is. That page itself has also had over 3,500 views this season. So it is something that is does get visibility. It is popular out there. If you look, think we've had 3,697 views. We've got about 3,800 teams in the county. So we've almost had one view per team in the county. So it is actually a valuable resource and is something where you may be able to pick up new players throughout the course of the season. Moving on then, just to look at some of the external recruitment avenues you may also wish to consider. As mentioned earlier, you get a lot of online community notice boards, but you do still get a lot of physical notice boards, particularly in some of the more rural areas of the county where I know that the player recruitment is certainly a challenge. So if you think anytime you pop into local supermarkets, into the co-ops or doctor surgeries, churches, town halls, coffee shops, a lot of them will have notice boards where you can post flyers or A4 posters up for free and try and reach out to members of the local community that may not otherwise be connecting with. Basically, if you think of all those places you've seen them, the flyers for local community plays or yoga sessions, particularly popular at the moment, pre and postnatal classes, no reason why you can't put on there as well something trying to advertise for anyone that's interested in playing football can come along for a kick around to a training session on a Thursday night and so forth. Particularly, you may want to target those areas where people have that kind of active mindset. So speak with one of the local gyms, see if you can put down some flyers there if anybody wants to move from the gym to playing football. Equally, doctor surgeries or community centres where they run some of those more social community-based exercise classes or yoga and Pilates classes, you may actually be able to pick up some traction and pick up some new players. You can also look to build some local partnerships with other clubs and organisations that are already out there. You've got other sports clubs, particularly the summer sports clubs, where you can look to try and build up some partnerships with them. So if you think that local cricket and tennis clubs are probably going to be quite dormant during the winter months, but those players will still want to be active, will still want to be getting involved in local sports. So there's an opportunity for those cricketers, hockey players, tennis players, be they who they are, may actually be able to or want to come down and have a kick around on a weekend as well. And if you try and put it to them, it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge commitment to them. You're not necessarily talking week in, week out, every Saturday and training twice a week. But actually, if they become part of that wider pool of players, they get a text message on a Thursday because you're short of players on a Saturday, you might find you can start picking up some players through that. Chances are as well, if they're good at one sport, they may have a decent right foot on them and might also be quite useful at football, so it might help out on the pitch as well. You can also try and get a bit creative with this. So there's potential for two sports clubs to partner in other areas. I mentioned it in a previous presentation looking at volunteer recruitment and retention. But actually, people who are involved in sports and sports governing bodies are going to operate vaguely similar kinds of procedures. So actually, if you can partner across different aspects of the club, they may be able to help out on some of the administration as well. But you also may get to the point where actually you could join as a community sports organisation generally, potentially offer reduced membership if they sign up across multiple sports. So rather than having someone paying £100 a season for cricket and £100 a season for football, actually maybe £150 per season to play for both sports, split 50-50, and you may start picking up some additional income, some additional players through that. It's also worth taking a look at some small-sided providers locally. We're doing a pilot at the moment in the Reading area where we're working with one of our adult 11-a-side leagues and also a small-sided provider to help share promotion and help share information about players so that actually players can transfer from one format to the other. What we're increasingly finding in football is that younger players, millennials, call them what you will, are looking for perhaps more casual opportunities to stay fit, to get active and to play in sports. So they may not currently be looking to put down a commitment of, as I said, 2 or 3 nights a week training and playing football, but actually they quite like the more recreational side of small-sided providers where it's a smaller commitment to them. That could actually also be then an entryway into playing for one of these a bigger affiliated 11-a-side club. And so actually just making sure that those links are there, that those players in small-sided know that there is an opportunity if they do want to come out on a weekend, play on a grass pitch, play 11-a-side, and make sure your contact details are shared with that small-sided provider in some of those clubs. From our point of view, it's also important that it works the other way, and that we're conscious that 11-a-side adult male football in particular is in a delicate position at the moment as we are losing players and teams far too regularly. But actually, the transition can go the other way, so that if we are finding that a team's no longer sustainable in adult 11-a-side football, there's still an opportunity for those players to keep playing through a small-sided provider, keep active, and it may well be that a season down the line or a few months down the line even, they're able to come back for another adult affiliated club on 11-a-side football. Can also work through the youth adult transition, and we've got a partnership program that we've launched recently called the Adopt a Club program. And this is really aimed at providing that transition and getting youth and adult clubs to work together so that young players coming through the game that are hitting 16, 17, 18 years old actually have a pathway into the adult game and have that opportunity to cut their teeth, get some game time playing in 11-a-side adult football. The information on this should be on the screen right now. It is something we've launched, as I said, as an official partnership scheme. And what we're looking for when clubs partner up is that they would create a service level agreement, which is nothing, we're not talking reams of legal paperwork, but it is just a commitment that the two clubs share, that they will work together, share resources, create some of these player pathways, and work towards a shared development plan. The way the project works is that we've identified 14 potential areas where clubs could work together, although it's by no means restricted just to these 14 areas. And we asked the two clubs to come together and commit to completing at least 3 of them. So it's things like open coaching sessions, sharing committee members, working together on development plans or sharing pitches and facilities, running joint events, whether that's CPD events or fundraisers and social events, and potentially creating additional sites to help bridge that transition. So it really is trying to get those two clubs intertwined, sharing resources and kind of working together across all aspects of the club. If they're able to then come back to us and say that they've completed those 3 areas, both teams, or both clubs, sorry, will get £75 in discount football kit vouchers as well. So it's £150 across both clubs. You'll also get dedicated support throughout that process from a member of our development team. So if you are interested, certainly recommend contacting us, support at berks-bucksfa.com. We'll put you in touch with one of the development team members and they can help get that off the ground. We've got quite a lot of adult clubs certainly who are interested in it, particularly ones that have a lot of experience in club administration. Some of our larger, more senior step clubs are involved. So there are opportunities for youth clubs to get involved in it as well. Keep those players in the game. And as I said, hopefully we'll all be working together to try and make sure football stays as sustainable as possible. So those are just a few ideas around potential avenues you can take for recruitment. So we looked at internal recruitment, trying to utilise the players and the membership you've already got, bring in additional players. We looked at potential online resources, both social media, community notice boards, and then what we can do here at Berks and Bucks. And then looking at some of the more external avenues you can take through, again, canvassing your local area, building up relations with local clubs, whether that's other sports or other local football clubs, and trying to bridge that gap between youth and adult football. And the other thing I should say around the Adopt a Club scheme is we've also seen some partnerships evolve between Saturday and Sunday clubs, again, sharing players, sharing some resources, and just trying to make sure that some of those more vulnerable clubs who are struggling for players are able to pull players from a wider source. I'm now going to take a look at some of the regulations from the FA that underpin all this and try and break down some of the barriers that certainly exist around some of these requirements, shall we say, when you're looking to sign new players. First up, I just want to cover what status players have in grassroots football. So the vast majority of our players that we're going to be looking at will be considered under FA definitions as a non-contract player. That means that they don't have a formal long-term contract where there is remuneration or benefits from playing it for that club, and they don't have a contract logged with the FA's registration team that the club or the player can fall back on if there is any dispute. What that means as well is that registrations will last for 1 season only, so the current season only, and therefore expire at the end of May every year. During those summer months then, a player is free to re-register for the following season with any club that they wish. There is no commitment to a specific club for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, whatever it may be, at the grassroots level. And players can also be registered with multiple clubs each season. I'll come on to a bit more information about that shortly. There are then some additional requirements and regulations when it comes to youth football, as you might expect. So just to clarify what category of youth footballer falls under, their age group is based on their age on the 31st of August of the playing season. Runs differently to school years, because there's a bit of variation between different schools and different districts and in different counties as to what date they pick as the cut-off point for what school year you run in. But the FA's definition is your age group, as I said, is based on your age on the 31st of August of each playing season. Within that, a player can play up 1 age group. So a 6-year-old player on the 31st of August would be considered an under-7s player, and they would be eligible to play in under-7 or under-8 football. If they're 14 years old on the 31st of August, they're considered under-15 or under-16 football. The one restriction that there is within that is that no player under the age of 6 is allowed to play football in an organised match in any way, shape or form until the point that they turn 6 years old, at which point they become eligible for under-7s football only. So if a child is 5 years old on the 31st of August, they're not able to play until they turn 6, and at that point they are only allowed to play in under-7s football. I'm sure anybody involved in youth clubs will be familiar with the table on the screen right now. That just kind of summarizes that age group restriction. So if you pick an age on the midnight on the 31st of August, that will tell you which age groups they are then eligible for. If a player is 16 on the 31st of August, they're eligible to play in under-17, under-18 football or open-aged football. The only other comment to make would be around dispensation, and this is something that does come up a few times each season. Dispensation is required if you want a youth player to play down an age group. That is something which can only be provided by the National FA at Wembley. It's not something that we're allowed to provide dispensation for or special exemptions or permission within the county FA. Traditionally, dispensation has been based around medical conditions which restrict physical growth. However, over the past few years, it has been relaxed somewhat, and we are seeing more and more exemptions or dispensation allowed if a player has been kept down an age group or so at school, and all of their social network, group of friends are in a slightly different age group. On those cases, if their birth date is close to that 31st of August cutoff, you may find dispensation will be granted. However, it was originally introduced to assist players that had restricted physical development. So they can't guarantee that if a player is, let's say, at the upper end of an age group, but has been held down in academic year for whatever reason, there's no guarantee that they would be allowed to play down a year in football either. Beyond the FA regulations, there are different regulations as well around league registrations. So for adult players, a player can only be registered with one club in one league. As I mentioned earlier, a player can be registered across multiple clubs in multiple leagues. That is still allowed if those leagues do play on the same day of the week. They'll be considered dual registered on Saturday football. And the clubs just need to be conscious that any discipline picked up in one league will also impact discipline or may lead to suspension in their league as well. See this a lot around players that maybe on that borderline of first and reserve team football, where let's say a first team plays in something like the Hellenic League, but a reserve team may play in Thames Valley Premier. They will both be registered with, or they'll be registered with both leagues. It's both considered Saturday football. Actually, they could be registered in different, could also be registered for different clubs across both leagues. Within a single league, if multiple clubs are looking to sign the same player and do submit registration forms for them, it's rare, but the priority is then given to the club which submits the registration first. You'd also want to probably be having a conversation with the player that's shopped themselves around a couple of different clubs and made promises to different people that he'll be able to play for them. But ultimately, if two clubs try to submit registration for the same player, it's never got there first. Once that registration has been submitted, any change of registration must be done through a formal transfer from the league. And it's important as part of that you watch your registration deadlines, both in terms of if there is a cut-off date at which point you can no longer register players, or what's more common in the leagues is there will be a cut-off point after which you will no longer be able to transfer a player. Generally, that tends to run around the end of March or so. In youth leagues, lots of the same requirements apply. So priority will still be given to the club which submits registration first if two clubs in the same age group look to register a player. And then once a player has become registered for a club, any change of registration must be by transfer. So in youth leagues, a player can only be registered for one team per age group. Makes sense, you don't want them playing across multiple teams, across multiple clubs. However, that player can be registered for different clubs in different age groups within the same league, provided they're still eligible under the age group requirements. Now, where this kind of takes effect And again, it's exceptionally rare that this does happen, but let's say a club has an under-14 provision but does not have an under-15 team, and you've got a 13-year-old player that's eligible for under-14s and under-15s. That player could conceivably also register with a second club in the other age group. So it could be registered with Club A in the under-14s and Club B in the under-15s. Perfectly allowed and accepted under FA regulations. What we would say around that is that there are guidelines issued by the FA around appropriate number of minutes that a youth player should be playing on any given day. And that depends on the age group. So the younger the age group, the fewer minutes that should be played. Now, if there is a player that is registered across multiple teams, and even more so if they're registered across multiple clubs, it does take, or the onus is really on the coaches to monitor that and work together to make sure that that player isn't being overplayed. Those guidelines are there for a reason, which is we don't want to risk injury to players because we're overplaying them when their bodies are still developing and they are still growing. So it is important that if you are aware that your players registered with another club, you kind of have those conversations on a regular basis and ultimately act in the best interest of the child. Moving on to notices of approach, and this is an issue that crops up on a very regular basis, just around clubs requesting clarification around what it might mean, and where we've had some issues around potential breaches of this. So the FA regs are that if a player's current club has a team which plays on the same day of the week as any of your own teams and you're looking to sign them, you must provide written notice of approach to their club secretary. So if you have within your club a Saturday side and the player that you're looking to sign, their current club also has a Saturday side, you'd be expected to provide that notice of approach. So what does the notice of approach look like? It is just a written notice to the counterpart club secretary saying that you're intending to sign Joe Bloggs in the Berks and Bucks League. Do they have any objections or any comments on this? The reason that we ask you to provide a notice of approach is that it actually gives that current club the opportunity to change the player's mind. If you're looking at a transfer and they're going to be moving from one club to another within the same league, so it gives them an opportunity to change that player's mind, convince them to stay. As I said, it also informs the club that they'll be playing elsewhere, so that they're conscious if there's a chance that they're playing in another league on a Saturday morning, they play on a Saturday afternoon, but actually that player may pick up a red card for their new team and therefore could be suspended for them a week later. It also also allows them to kind of be conscious that they may pick up injuries elsewhere where it could impact them. It tends to also be that it applies across the entire club rather than just the team you're looking to register them for, because we want to be able to give that player's current club the opportunity to get them to sign for the team on another day of a week. So if you are in a club that has a Saturday and a Sunday side, players currently registered for your first team on a Saturday, but actually use the Sunday side as a bit of a reserve team or to help players get back from injury, and he's approached by another Sunday club, you may want to try and convince him to stay with your Sunday side to give him the opportunity to play, but still be within the same organisation and within the same club. Another important factor to note when it comes to notices of approach is that the regulations still apply if it's the player that approaches the club first. So if it's a club manager or a secretary, you're approached by Joe Bloggs who plays for an opposition club and says, I want to come and sign for you. You have to stop the conversation there, say, brilliant, appreciate that. Cannot discuss this anymore until we've provided notice of approach to your current club. Go back, knock out that email to the opposition club secretary and let them know that the players approached you looking to sign for you. This still gives them the 7-day notice of approach. If that player's come to you and you said, brilliant, sign this form, I'm going to submit you straight to the league, you will have committed a breach by not providing that notice of approach to their current club. The timeline for a notice of approach. Notice gets sent, that is day one. Now the player's current club can waive that notice at any time. So they might get the email and say, immediately respond, no problem, good luck, by all means sign him. At that point, you're allowed to sign the player immediately. That's route A, and hopefully 9 times out of 10, the route it will take in certainly is the preferred route. Alternative route is that you send a notice and no reply is received, or you get an rejection. You have to wait 7 days, so you have to wait until that notice expires. On the 8th day, you are allowed to sign them to the club and submit their registration to the league. Now, that player must be signed by the 21st day, or the notice expires and you're no longer allowed to sign them. They will remain a player for the first club. Beyond that, there are some other restrictions just to be aware of. If you've gone ahead and approached Joe Bloggs playing for Club A, he rejects you, says actually, no, I don't want to sign for you, I'm going to stay with Club A, much prefer it here. You cannot approach that same player for a second time in the same playing season. You try again in the summer, once all registrations are open season, but during the course of the football season, you cannot go back and keep trying to convince the same player on multiple occasions to sign for you. Equally, you cannot approach more than one player from a club at any given time. So you can't go to Joe Bloggs and John Smith and say, we want you both to come. You have to do it one after another. And you cannot approach another player at the club within 20 days of the first notice. If you do want to sign Joe Bloggs and John Smith from Club A, put in the notice for Joe Bloggs. Once that player then signs for you, so once the notice is waived or that notice expires, you can have to then wait 28 days before you can then try and sign John Smith. This is there just to try and protect clubs that they don't suddenly find all of their players are jumping ship mid-season, leaving them in the lurch as they all go and sign for the league leaders. One of the biggest issues that comes up around player approaches really relates to finances and whether that player or players that move clubs but still owing a lot of outstanding membership fees or disciplinary fees for their previous club. Now, the regulations state that the onus is really on the signing club, that they must be satisfied that all reasonable and financial liabilities have been discharged with the player's previous club at the point that they want to sign them. Now, how you do this is another matter. If it's during the season and you're issuing a notice of approach, pretty sure that the current club will come back and say, that's fine, but he still owes us 100 quid in membership fees. That should then be resolved before you actually get to the point of signing the player. It happens during the closed season. It's much harder to track. There's no obligation to provide that written notice of approach, and you say to Joe Bloggs, have you paid off everything from previous season? Yeah, of course I have. Sign him. And there may still be some unpaid dues there. As I said, the onus is really on the signing club, and what we really encourage is that clubs do try and work together on this. We recognise finances are tight across the board in grassroots football, and chances are for players leaving a club with a massive pile of unpaid debts, there's quite a strong chance that that same player may do the same to you further down the line, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, that they'll be leaving you with half of their membership fees and yellow and red card fines outstanding. So really encouraging clubs to work together, make sure all outstanding debts have been paid, equipment's been returned, that's another key one. None of emails we get saying, Joe Bloggs has now moved to Club B, but he still has our kit. We're trying to play mediator and try and get him to return a kit of a team he's never going to play for again. It's hanging up in his wardrobe. These areas where really the clubs can work together and just try and use a bit of common sense to make sure that everything has been repaid and returned that needs to be before you take on that player. Looking at this from a transfer point of view, first up, as I mentioned earlier, please check league rules for deadlines and fees. It is important. We don't want to get clubs stung because actually they've missed the registration deadline, they've missed the transfer date. There's not quite the same clamour as we get in the Premier League with Jim White and his transfer deadline days. So those deadlines will change from league to league, so please be conscious of them. If there is an objection to a transfer, that can be referred to the League Management Committee, who will make that ultimate decision on whether to allow the transfer or not. However, leagues cannot block a registration due to an outstanding football debt. As I said, the onus is on the signing club to be satisfied that all financial liabilities have been repaid when they sign a player. But if a player is signed and there is an outstanding debt, the league's not able to block that player's registration, the player's previous club should be contacting us at the County FA to request action under the football debt recovery process. In a few moments, I'm going to jump onto whole game system so I can try and do a practical demonstration of registering a player in whole game. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk through what that process actually looks like. So all bar 3 of our leagues in Berks and Bucks now use the whole game system for their player registration process. And it will become mandatory across all FA-affiliated grassroots football leagues, so any league that the County FA affiliates as well, at the start of the 21-22 season. So season after next, all players will be required to be registered on the whole game system. So really, it kind of helps to be aware of that. And if you are, even if you're in one of those leagues that isn't yet using it, chances are they'll be coming on next season. If not the season afterwards when it's mandatory, but you can actually get a jump on it by starting to add some of your players to the whole game system. Process is, I'm going to run through now, is if you are in a league that's already using Player Reg. If they're not, actually all you need to do are the first 2 steps, which is searching and creating the player and then adding them to the club. So if you are in a player registration league, it's a 5-step process, which hopefully takes about 1 minute to 2 minutes per player, and we'll see how true that is when I give it a go later. So the first step will always be to search the database, search the whole game system for the player using their personal details, so their name or their fan number, date of birth and address. If they're already in the system, fantastic, you just add them straight to your club. If they're not already in the system, you then have the opportunity to create them as a new player on the whole game system. At that point, you're attaching them to the club, which will then allow you to add them to a team within your club. You do have to make sure that even if you are a 1-team club, you do have to go through both steps on that. Once you've added them to a team, you confirm their consent. You can do that either by asking them to confirm it electronically by email or through an offline consent. If you do have offline consent, you are still expected to have a manual registration form that if there are any registration concerns or queries, you can fall back on to say, yes, this player has agreed to sign for my club. If not, the electronic consent through email, which I'll show you later on, will stand and will confirm that registration and that consent for you. Once you have all those in place, you can then submit the registration to the league. The league secretary will get a notification and it goes over to them to confirm that player's registration with the league for that season. There are a couple of potential issues that may crop up during that time as we improve our database. The first is that if a player is registered for a club at step 4 and above, they can only be added to your club by the County FA. The reason we do that is to try and stop everyone searching for Harry Kane and getting all of his personal details. So anyone that is registered at step 4 and above, we check to see if they have a contract with one of their step clubs. Provided there isn't a contract, we will then add them to the club for you. That process, if you drop us an email or ring us up on the phone, takes about 30 seconds. It's not a laborious process, but does involve County FA intervention. The second one will be if a player returns multiple records. Ideally, we're trying to get to the point, and it's the goal that every individual in football has one unique record, one fan number. However, certainly players that have been around the block a few times, played for multiple clubs, picked up discipline here, there, and everywhere across the country may have multiple records on the system. So if you punch in a player's name and date of birth, let's say you're punching in Joe Smith, very common name, born on 31st of July 2000, so he's 19 years old. They may well bring up multiple records of them, and it will then ask you to contact us at the County FA so that we can do a bit of a deeper check to see if it's multiple versions of the same player or we will make sure you get the correct player added. So you're not adding a player from Northumberland, let's say. Finally, different leagues will have different requirements around registration photos and how recently a photo has to have been uploaded to the whole game system. If you've got a player that's already got a photo on there that may be 2 or 3 years old, and you're signing them for a league that's asking for a photo no more than a year old, you'll have to contact the county FA so that we can remove the existing one and allow you to add a new photo for them. To do that, we've got a generic email address, playerregistrations@berks-bucksfa.com. You're also welcome to email myself personally. I'll probably pass it on to someone else in the team, or if I'm not too busy, I'll try and get it done for you. A lot of you who've been through this process will know Alex Smith, who leads on this for us, and is an absolute eagle eye when it comes to our emails and trying to help out. So just to try and give you some context around player registration queries that come through to us and our commitment to that, we're conscious it is probably one of the most time-sensitive issues that will come through to us here at the county, particularly on a Thursday or a Friday. Clubs are trying to get players signed, ready to play on a Saturday. So it's something where quite often you will need a quick turnaround to make sure you meet those deadlines. So since the 1st of July, since the first of the season, we've had almost 1,400 player registration queries come through to us at the county FA. The average response time for those is an hour and a half. And considering that those 1,400 queries will include emails that come through late on the working day and may not get picked up until the next morning, I think that's actually a pretty good response time. Sometimes, particularly during those peak registration periods, we put more resources into that across September and October. You may actually be in a position where you're getting a response and getting a player added within half an hour. If you email. If you call through, we'll be able to resolve it. Hopefully, 99 times out of 100, be able to resolve it there and then for you on the phone. Across those player registration emails, we also have 99% customer satisfaction. So you know it's something that hopefully we're good at, we're responsive to, and we will try and resolve for you as quickly and as accurately as possible. All right, now I'm going to come on to a practical demonstration looking at the whole game system and what that process looks like. This is where I hope that everything is still keeping me logged in from earlier. So what I've done here is logged into the whole game system. Those of you who have sat on a couple of these other presentations will know I like to play around and do demonstrations on our office team that we set up as a demonstration club. So when you come onto your main club dashboard, you'll see the tabs down the left-hand side here. And to add a new player is simply go through the player registration tab. It's been too long since I logged in, so let me just log back in quickly. Great. Get onto the player registration tab, and this will bring up a list of players who are already registered for your club. You see members of staff there. If you are looking to add a new player or to your club and want to check, first of all, are they in the that database? So I'm doing this too quickly. So you want to check if a player is already on the system. You come over here to the right-hand side and the search for player function. This will allow you to search the entire whole game database, all million-plus players we have registered up and down the country. First place you'll come through to is first and surname once the long-running script expires. So for this, I am going to add a new player, someone I know isn't on the system, but we will add for us. So BBFA demo player. Strange name, you know, but such is life. We'll put them down as having been born on the 1st of January 2000, the epitome of a millennial. If I now search for that, it will come up and tell me that 0 contacts are found with those players. What you can do is you can search wider across the database to see if maybe you've got the date of birth slightly wrong. You can also add a postcode. If you know, well, actually, they've previously played for, let's say, I know that BBFA demo players played for Abingdon United. Start typing in the club and it comes up with the full database. You can now do a search. They're still coming up as blank. In that case, what you will do is create them as a brand new player on the system. Automatically pulls through the information you've already added. So their first and last name and date of birth. I'll then ask you to add a postcode. See if I can get the correct postcode for the county. So I'll put them as living here with me at the county office. It will soon become mandatory to add an email, so I will pop that in. I ask you to confirm their gender. If you have a photo, you can add a photo there. If not, you then save player. If you're adding an email, you can save them and immediately request the online player consent, or you can just save them as a player and it will add them through to your list of players. It can take a little while for their fan number to be generated, but they should start appearing in your list of players immediately. So now come back to player registration. You'll now see BBFO demo player is listed and is listed as a waiting fan. So that's how easy it is to search for and add a brand new player. If you search for an existing player and they're already on the database, it'll just say, do you want to attach this player? And you go straight through to that process. Next step, I just want to kind of show you some of the functionality you've got, particularly if you're a large club, you've got a couple of hundred players, it can be a bit onerous. It's nice to go through every single page of the list of players to try and find a specific one. What you can do is you can break it down by age group. I think pretty much everybody here at Berks, oh no, the newly created ABFA players should be come up as under 23, 21. No, maybe not. So you can filter by your by these categories across the top. Anybody that's already registered for a team, you can filter by that, or if they're not yet assigned to a team, they'll show up in the list there. So that number's gone down to 14. To reset it, just go back up to that subject header. You can search by male or female players. You can see it then cycles through the number. You can also then search by what their league registration status is. So you can always check those who are pending a league approval or who haven't actually been registered yet. Equally, you can confirm who has and hasn't had consent or where consent's been requested. One thing that you do need to be conscious of is that if you do filter this, however you may need to filter it, those requirements will stay as a filter until you clear them. So if I were to log out of whole game system right now, log back in 5 minutes time, it would still be showing just myself down as one player for the club because those filters are still being applied. We get a few phone calls every season where clubs are suddenly concerned they've lost half their players because they're no longer showing up. First thing to check, click the clear filters and suddenly all your players should come back and they were only just being filtered out from that initial search page. The reason we have this is to try and improve the speed of the page load time when you click back into it. Now, to check the player status and whether they've been added to a team, whether they're registered by the league, all you do is come to the player's name, and over on the right-hand side here, you'll see the big down arrow. If you click that, it will tell you what my status is. So it shows that consent is pending. I'm part of Berks and Berks FA. Haven't had a league registration submitted yet, but I'm also a member of Berks and Berks Office Veterans and Berks Office Demo Team. If you want to remove the player from a team at any point, click on the red button. This will remove me from Berks and Berks Office Veterans. And now I am only listed as a player, drag that down again, for the Office Demo Team. That helps you keep your squad list current all through the season. Now, if you want to add them to a team, request consent, or make any actions with that player, just click on the square icon by their picture and by the name, and you'll see a banner has now come down from the top. From here, you can download a registration form, which you can get the player to sign, and then you can click to confirm their offline consent. Or you can, up in the top right-hand corner here, request consent. If they've got an email address added, that will then send them an email and ask them to confirm that they will be playing for that team. That email will then look something like this. This will pop up in the player's inbox. From FA whole game system, do not reply. Scroll down, Berks and Berks Office have requested you confirm you wish to play for them for the 1920 season. using player registration system. Come through here and respond to the request. Once it goes through all the spam filtering, pops up, dear Alistair, thanks for coming to this page. Before we can ask you to confirm, please can you provide date of birth? Pop that in, that just confirms my identity. That matches the club. Confirm I'm not a robot. And submit. Then say, do you agree? Do you not agree to whether you play for the team or not? Once that's done, you're now registered with that club for the season, and the club can now submit that registration to the league. I refresh this page now. With any luck, that will show my consent as being approved. Yep, consent is now accepted. Or you can also do, you can do this in bulk. So if you click 5, 6 players, however many you need, and click request consent, they will all get that same email asking them to confirm that they'll be playing for the club. Once you have that consent accepted, you can then submit that registration to the league. I'll just quickly show you what it says if you are doing an offline consent. So if you do click offline consent, it just gives you a warning prompt to say that by confirming their offline consent, you are declaring you have their permission and that you can provide evidence of that if requested by the league. So that is prompting you that you do have that hard copy as a backup should there be any queries or concerns around it. So once you've got the consent, you've been added to the team, and you can do that just by clicking Assign to Teams up at the top here. And this will always filter according to their age group and what teams are therefore eligible to play in. Once they're assigned to the club, assigned to the team, and you've got their consent, you can then submit to the league. It will give you this prompt to confirm that they don't require international clearance or they already have it. And I'll come on to that in a second. And then you just click submit and it goes through to the club. So hopefully, as you can see, it's a really easy process to register a player and submit that registration through to the league. We're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible and as online and smooth and efficient as possible. One thing hopefully clubs are aware of is that from the 21-22 season onwards, email addresses will also be mandatory for all players. So at that time that it becomes mandatory to register players through the whole game, it will also be mandatory that each player has a unique email address. This will make that whole consent process a lot quicker and easier because that email can go directly to that player to say, yes, I agree, I am playing for that club this season. Final thing I'll say before I jump back to the presentation is that your list of players will always show every player that's registered with you until you manually detach them from your club. So what you may have is when you come back into the registration September or October of this year, you will see all players that played for you last season. If that player is no longer part of the club and has left to go somewhere else, all you need to do is check the icon by their name and click detach from club. That will then remove them from your list of players, so you'll no longer receive any notifications around them, around discipline, and it just keeps that list of membership as up to date as possible, so you're not having to wade through hundreds and hundreds of players to pick your 30-man squad. What we can't do is automatically have those expire at the end of the season. So that's the practical demonstration sorted. As promised, I was just going to make a mention around international clearance. So clubs must request international clearance for any player who's previously been registered abroad, and the first time they then come back to England to play, and the first time an overseas national registers with a club in the country. This applies to all players over the age of 10. So if a player is 11 years old, you will have to go through this process. And crucially, it also applies to players moving from the other home nations, so players from Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Because they're other national associations and a player can only be registered with one national association at a time, you do have to go through the international clearance process if you're signing a player that's just moved from Cardiff, shall we say. That application is made directly to the FA at Wembley and their registrations department. The county FA doesn't have any role in that process, and unfortunately we cannot influence it or provide temporary approval. We can chase sometimes the FA, but that's about it. What we can do is just help with the process and explain what the requirements are and give you access to the forms. So if you do ever have any questions around international clearance, then please feel free to contact us and we'll hopefully point you in the right direction. Great. To recap on the information we've looked at this evening then, that pretty much concludes the main bulk of the presentation and the information dump that's been splurged on you. But as always, do look to just try and provide some practical advice and some messages to take away. Obviously, we looked at two different areas here, so I've broken them down into two different sections. First, around that player recruitment. Advice we can offer here is get creative, really. Look at different ways you can try and use the resources already available to you. So use your players, try and find what will motivate them to help bring in new teammates, and look at potential external partnerships you can take advantage of within the local community. And if you do have any really good practice, creative ideas around that, different initiatives you've tried, please let us know, because we'd love to be able to share them across clubs around the rest of the county. Also look to work with local partner clubs. That may be local clubs in other sports, as we mentioned, with the summer sports, cricket and tennis, but also work with other local partner football clubs, whether that's a Saturday club working with a Sunday club, or adult clubs working with youth clubs to try and assist in that transition for those 16, 17, 18-year-olds coming up into adult football. Finally, and this is a plea really from our part, which is to talk to us. We had an email today, unfortunately, from a club within the county who said that they will be folding at the end of the season because they've lost so many players over the last 6 months. It kills us, honestly, when we receive those, because we care. We really do care about football. We really do care about our clubs and wanting to make sure they're sustainable. So please, if you are beginning to feel a pinch, you are getting worried that you're losing players or you're not able to recruit enough, come contact us. We've got development team, we've got staff here dedicated to helping clubs grow and try and become sustainable both on and off the pitch. So we're more than happy to give you any support and advice and guidance we can do. Obviously, we need to know that you're having problems before we can try and really put some of those positive interventions in place. Looking then at the flip side around registrations, if you are adding a new player to the club, please check on the whole game system before you create them as a new player. Chances are, with 3 seasons into the player registration process, in something like 80% of the leagues nationally using it, chances are that player will already be on the system. To be honest, if a player comes to you and says, I've been playing in next town over for the last 5 years, but I can't tell you what my fan number is, or you can't find one on the system, you might also start asking questions about how someone has been around for that long without having any footprint on FA records at this point. To help you in that, we'd encourage you to check the player's ID to confirm identity. Again, we have a bit of a horror story from this season where, unfortunately, a player under a long-term suspension moved to or registered with a new club in a different town, gave a fake name, was then registered, and that player and the club have both been charged for playing whilst under suspension. So we do encourage you, even if there's no ID required as part of a registration process with your league, still encourage you to check that player's ID just so you can confirm their name, address, and date of birth and search on the whole game system for them. If you've got any doubts around the notice of approach process, just drop an email to any club they're currently registered with, regardless of what day of the week they play on. To some extent, you'd say it's a courtesy. You're going to be signing their player, and he may well pick up a suspension or an injury whilst playing for you that will impact them. I'm sure if one of your players went and registered with another club on a different day of the week, quite like to know about that just so that you can monitor it. So we do encourage you always contact counterparts clubs just as a courtesy. And then, as I mentioned, from season after next, it will be mandatory for all players to have unique email addresses in order to be registered on the whole game system. So we also give you a recommendation just to start bearing that in mind and start collecting emails where possible. I think across the county, we have something like 70% of adult players already with email addresses. So a lot of clubs are already working towards this, and it shouldn't be too onerous to pick up those 3 or 4 additional players per club that haven't got an email address on their fan. If you do need any additional resources, there's a wealth of information and support on our website. If you go to berks-bucksfa.com and then the Leagues and Clubs tab across the top, there's information there around recruitment, around club management, marketing, finance, the whole game system, how to do the technical side of things. And so there's a lot of information there available for you. And obviously, we're always at the end of the phone or at the end of an email trying to respond to everything as quickly as we possibly can. Just a reminder that this is the 7th session of BBFA support. We're well over halfway through the season now. If you do want to go back and watch any of the previous sessions, they are on our website. It's bbfa.com, berks-bucksfa.com/club-management/BBFA support. All the videos are available on YouTube. We did a bit of a reminder about a month ago to clubs, resending them the link, and a lot of these videos I think across all videos, we've had over 200 views now on YouTube. So I hope the information is useful. Appreciate it can be quite dry as we go through the regulations, but hopefully it is taking away some of the mystique and is making it a bit more transparent about what our procedures are and what some of these rules governing grassroots football are. If you are interested in joining me for the next one, it will be a month today, Tuesday the 12th of March at 7 o'clock, back online here, and we'll be looking at charter standards and health checks. There's some changes coming up over the next few seasons around the charter standard process, so hopefully we'll get either get somebody from the FA to share the presentation with me, or who will actually be able to join us on the WebEx itself and deliver it, so you're getting the information straight from the horse's mouth. That is it for the presentation this evening. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat function. If not, thank you very much for joining me, and I wish you all a good evening. Thank you.